Hi everyone, this is Crystal, and today I'm sharing another 12 by 12 layout. It is a cold November rainy morning. I am in my worn out cozy sweatshirt and I have a warm cup of coffee in my Nebraska mug because I was feeling a little nostalgic for home. And I'm doing a page with this photo. This is a photo of two of our dogs taken a little while ago. I guess this was 2016. It's one of my favorite photos of the two of them. They're at our local nature park playing and they're rolling around in the grass. They're clearly just having a blast. So I thought it was perfect for the new scrapbook.com cut file, Be Happy, which is what I'm working with today. I've put it up on the screen so that you could see it. I've already cut it out of this paper. This is from Wildflower and Honey from Vicki Boutin and American Crafts. It's called Queen Bee. So I have already cut the title here, which is probably really hard to see, but I've cut the title, Be Happy, and I've cut a few of the bees as well. I'll be backing those with some cardstock. I have this is just white cardstock from American Crafts, and then this is Basil Lemonade. It's a textured cardstock. So I've cut it from both because I want to back different parts of it in the two. And to do that, I have just created an offset. I created an internal offset in Silhouette Studio and made sure that it would fit inside the original title cut file, and then just cut it from the two cardstocks. So for my background, I have another sheet of American Crafts white cardstock. This is actually the one that's labeled heavy duty, but to be honest with you, I can't feel any difference between these two. So in the future, I probably won't be purchasing the heavy duty one. I literally cannot tell the difference. So just any white cardstock will work. My favorite happens to be the white textured cardstock from American Crafts. Okay, so for other supplies, I also have another sheet of, as you can see, this Queen Bee paper, because I think I want to use that as part of my background. And I've also grabbed a sheet from Bella Boulevard. This is from Home Sweet Home. It's called Mosaic Tile. So this is Mosaic Tile from Home Sweet Home by Bella Boulevard because I wanted a yellow paper and I wanted it to be patterned. Okay, for embellishments, I've grabbed a few things from my stash. I have the One Canoe 2 sticker book and a few other things from One Canoe 2. I have just a few of these embellishments from Saturday Afternoon. They're the layered stickers. And then I also have the rub-ons from that same collection. I also have the washi tape set from that collection. So I grabbed it as well. And then from Dear Lizzy's It's All Good, I grabbed these because there are these two little bees on there. I thought I might as well try to use those. And then I also have from Vicki Boutin these layered butterflies, but there's also this really gorgeous packaging that I might consider using. And then I grabbed just a few enamel dots that I thought worked well. These are from the coffee collection from Echo Park. And for my background, I want to use the stencil from Wildflower and Honey from Vicki Boutin because it has that same pattern as that Queen Bee paper. So it has this kind of honeycomb stencil, and I have some Vicki Boutin art crayons that I thought would work well. They'll match the colors in this paper pretty well. So I want to try some mixed media on the background and see what I can come up with. Okay, so that is all the planning I've done so far. I'm just going to put you on fast forward and start working.
So I'm going to start by backing my cut files. I very carefully pulled all of them off of my cutting mat, and I'm going to try to back this title in two different colors. So I want the Be Happy to be white, but I want the bee in the center to be yellow. So I just laid the white backing piece that I had cut underneath, and then I just carefully drew lines where the bee started and just trimmed that out. So I'm going to back the bee part with the white piece and the happy part with the white piece. And then I'm going to use the piece that I cut off of the white piece to figure out where to cut the yellow piece to back the bee. I hope that makes sense, but just watch, you'll see what I'm doing. So I'm using a fine line bottle with some Scotch quick dry or tacky adhesive inside. It just allows me to get a really, really fine line of glue around this very delicate cut file. So it worked really well. And you can see I grabbed just a rag. I don't like to use paper towels because I don't like the waste of it. So I just have some rags in my scrap area. And I regularly put them through the wash and use those to kind of clean up the messes. So I just dabbed the glue off the top and the back. You could see at one point it kind of got stuck to my table, but my table's a mess anyways, so that's not a big deal to me. So here I have the yellow part to go behind the little bee that's on this cut file. And I also wanted to say that I actually downsized this cut file quite a bit. So it comes full 12-inch wide size. I only wanted it to be about 5.5 or so. So I cut it fairly small, which made all these little pieces even that much more delicate. But it worked out fine. It still cut great. And I was still able to place all these little pieces. You can see me placing the insides of all the letters, and I did the same thing with the inside of the bee. And then I can move on to these little bees that I cut. And again, I cut these pretty small. So there are 3 that I cut, that I sized down just to be embellishments on the page. And then that one is just the inside of the title. So I thought I would just trace around the centers to back them in yellow, but that seemed a little bit tedious. I thought it would be easier just to glue them down to some paper and then fussy cut around the edges. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm only adding glue to the body of the bee. So I want to back the wings with vellum and the centers with this yellow paper. So I'm leaving the wings free and just backing the centers, the bodies of the bees, and then I'll come in with some vellum later on and back those. And the wings are very delicate. They're not even fully attached at the bottom to the body of the bee, so it was a little bit difficult to back them with vellum, and the vellum ends up looking a little bit wonky, like it doesn't match exactly to the wings, but I think it looks fine. Like, I actually like that look. You'll see here in a second, I'm going to show you the finished cut files all backed. And you can see that, so there's the title. And here you'll see that the vellum doesn't perfectly match up with the wings. It kind of overlaps in places. But like I said, I kind of like that look. I think it I don't know. I just kind of like it. So the one thing I wish I had done was back the title bee with vellum wings, just like those little embellishments, but I didn't think of that until much later. So it's fine. It is what it is. It's still adorable. It still looks cool. Okay, so moving on to the mixed media on the page, I have my stencil from Vicki Boutin, and I have my art crayons as well. And I'm just using a little bit of washi tape to stick it down onto my background page. And then I have a little mat. It's like a little clear placemat from Dollar Tree, and I'm using that to draw the crayons on. And then I have a brush. This is actually also from Dollar Tree. So I found this makeup brush at Dollar Tree, and I thought I would give it a try. It's very similar to all of the very fancy brushes that people are using. I don't do this type of mixed media very often, so I definitely didn't want to invest the money in one of the fancier ones. But when I saw this one at Dollar Tree, I thought it is definitely worth a try for $1. So I think they even had 2 sizes. I only picked up this one, but I may actually go back and pick up another size if they have one, or even more of this size, just to have several in my stash, because it worked really, really well. So I just scribbled some of the art crayon down on my little plastic mat, and then used the brush in kind of a circular motion to pick it up, and then I'm using a circular motion on the page over the top of the stencil, and it just gives it a very soft, very crisp image. And it turned out really well. I really like the way it worked out. So I'm using 4 different colors and kind of blending them together, just giving it some shading and variation. And then you'll see me, I also just kind of clean off my brush in the center of the stencil, like right there, before switching colors, just to keep the colors from getting too muddy. And I know that that center part of the page is going to be covered with pattern paper, so I'm not worried about it looking messy there. So, okay, I do that a few more times. I move the stencil 4 times, and I'm just trying to get kind of a central area of color on the page. So there it is. That's the mixed media all done. I've already cleaned up all my big mess. And now I want to add some of this pattern paper, some of this Queen Bee pattern paper from Vicki Boutin. And sorry, it's really hard to see. I'm very close to the camera, but I'm just cutting kind of randomly around these little hexagons, leaving the white border. It's not really white, it's kind of an off-white, but leaving a border around the edge. So there it is all done. I didn't make you watch that. I was way too close to the camera anyway. But I just randomly cut kind of a blob of this paper out of the center. I wanted it to look very organic and natural and not be too straight. So I just kind of left some sticking out in different areas, and I'm going to add that right in the center of the page over the top of my mixed media. I need to add a matte to my photo, so I'm using that Bella Boulevard paper just to add a very thin matte of yellow around my photo. That's going to make my photo stand out against all of that busy background just a little bit better. So I'm just going to trim around that, just using a very simple straight matte, a thin matte around my photo. And then I can bring everything back, and I'm going to glue that blob of paper just directly down to the background. I want it just to be flat into the background, and for it to be like it's all one piece of background paper. I thought for a second about adding another matte to my photo with some of the B side of that Queen Bee paper, that navy blue, but I decided against it. I wanted the title to stand out, and I was worried that if I added more of that dark color around my photo, then it would draw your attention away from the title. So adding some glue there with my scrapbook.com tape runner and just gluing that straight down. So you can see the center of all of that mixed media is covered up. You just kind of see it poking around the edges, and it just adds another layer, another dimension to the page. You get lots of those little hexagons everywhere, which is perfect for a B page, right? Okay, so now I'm going to add some foam to the back of my photo. This is just fun foam that you can get at any big box store. I had a bunch of little scraps, so I'm just adding those. And then I had to grab another sheet because I didn't quite have enough to finish covering the back of my photo. But so that's adhesive on one side, and then I just use my tape runner on the other side. My scrapbook.com tape runner works really well on that foam. It's the only one I've found that works well on foam that will actually adhere to it. And then I'm also going to pop up my title. So I want my title to overlap my photo. Because of that, it needs to have some dimension on the other end of it. And I want it actually to sit up a little bit higher. So these foam dots are from American Crafts. They're Sticky Thumb brand. And they're a bit thicker than the fun foam that I used behind my photo. So it's going to allow that title to sit up higher than my photo and overlap it. So I added that. I haven't glued anything down to the page yet. I'm just kind of setting it all there to make sure I get the placement exactly where I want it before I add adhesive or pull off the backing of those little adhesive dots. And I'm looking through the embellishments I had pulled out. I grabbed that dimensional bee embellishment from the Dear Lizzy collection, but it didn't match the bees that I already had on the page, and I already had quite a few, and I felt like it just wasn't necessary. So I'm not going to end up using those. I will use some of these rub-ons. So this rub-on set had a line of little hexagons, which I thought would be perfect. So I'm going to sprinkle those all around the page, just kind of on the outside of where I've done my mixed media. And they're like a coppery color, so they add a little bit of sparkle to the page as well, and just another color and another bit of texture on the page. So I struggled with them a little bit because they're in a line, and I just want to use them individually instead of in that line. I thought I would need to trim each one out, but then that ended up being much more difficult than I thought it would be. They're kind of hard to they were like staticky. They kept sticking to my fingers, so I had a hard time getting them placed where I wanted to. So I ended up just leaving them on that full strip and then just carefully adding each one with the little popsicle stick that comes in that rub-on pack. So I've added all of them. I think I have one more here just to rub on, and then I can move on to other embellishments. So you can see I have those 4 bees spread around the page. I am going to add some foam adhesive behind them because I want them to stand out, and I want their little wings to kind of be able to move on the page, so I'm not adding any adhesive behind them. I'm just adding a single large foam dot behind the body of each bee. And then I can look at the other embellishments and see what else I want to add. I feel like it needs some florals at this point. So I have an outdoor photo, I have bees on the page and honeycomb, and I feel like there should be some flowers, right? So I thought about using those dimensional flowers from One Canoe 2, but they have pearl centers and that just didn't really go with the page. So instead I'm going to look through the sticker book and try and find some florals here that I can use. But because these stickers are super, super thin and some of them are clear, I decided to grab just a sheet of printer paper and stick them all down to some printer paper and then fussy cut them out instead of trying to stick them directly to the page. Because I have some dimension on the page, I have layers of paper. They wouldn't be able to sit flat on the page if I didn't add some kind of paper behind them. So I'm just going through this book and pulling out some that I think will work. I'm kind of steering away from the blue ones. I'm sticking with the pinks and yellows and greens, and just kind of randomly sticking them down on this page. And then I'm going to go through just with my fine point scissors and fussy cut around all of these. And I don't do a perfect job. Some of these are pretty delicate, and I leave a little bit of a white border around some of them, but I'm trying to mostly not have a white border. So it doesn't bother me that they're a little bit imperfect and that there's some white here and not in other places. So that's totally fine with me. Once I have all of those fussy cut out, I can go ahead and start adhering them down to the page. So I added some directly to the page, and then I'm going to pop a few of them up on some foam dots as well. Again, just to add some dimension and give the page some movement. So this one's going to overlap my photo just a little bit. So I'm just making sure that everything is going to be in the exact right spot, exactly where I want it. Get my photo moved into the right spot. Get all of these little florals in the right spot. I end up cutting off the leaves on those yellow flowers and adding them in other places just because they were covering up too much of the other florals in that cluster, and I wanted the leaves to be in different places than they were. So just trimmed them off and I can add them wherever I want to. I thought about adding some of this washi tape to the side. I stick it down, I end up moving it. I do end up using it, but I'll end up using it in a slightly different way. You'll see here in just a second. So adding that cluster that I popped up on some foam, and then adding the ones flat kind of behind it. And then I can start working on the other cluster as well. So here's where I'm just adding those leaves that I trimmed off back onto the page. Those leaves are a slightly different color than the other ones, so I definitely wanted to have them there to add some variation in color in the greens in those clusters. And then I'm adding my title as well, just to make sure that that gets stuck down where it needs to be, peeling off all those tiny little circles of backing paper, which is the worst part about using that foam adhesive, but it's not too bad. It wasn't too hard to peel all of those off. Doing the same with the bees, getting those stuck down, and then I will eventually work on that other floral cluster as well. So I'm doing the same thing here. I'm adding some glue to the bottom of the photos and then adding foam to the top, so it looks like they're kind of stuck to the page and then sticking up like they're kind of growing out of the page, which is something I do fairly often. It's a look that I like. And then popping up this other one that's going to kind of layer over the top of the two that are already there, and again adding another little leaf, and then continuing to stick down all the little pieces. So I end up adding this strip of washi tape to that printer paper that I had put all of those little florals on, and I'm going to end up fussy cutting it out as well. So I liked the phrase that's on it. It says "choose happy," but it was just too much. It was too big and too bold, so I just fussy cut out the phrase, and I thought about adding it to the side of my photo, but I'm going to end up adding it to that kind of blank spot at the top of my photo instead, and I do like the way that looks. That's also copper foil, so again, it just adds another little sparkle to the page. I looked through the other washi to see if there was anything else. There's a little blank spot at the bottom of my photo, and I feel like it needs something there. I thought washi might work, but I ended up not choosing washi, and I will end up doing something different instead. I also thought about adding some of those enamel dots I had pulled out, but they just didn't look right to me. So I think it's because there were so many hexagons on the page, and then the circles just didn't seem to fit. So yeah, I don't end up using those. And oh, so it felt a little just blank around the edge, and I thought about possibly adding a border around the whole page, But instead, I'm going to do my regular trick, the thing that I do fairly often, and just tear away a little bit of the page at the top and bottom and add a strip of paper behind each of those little chunks. So I just randomly cut just a wonky little chunk out of the top of the page and then use the edge of my scissors to distress it. And then I'm using some of the B side of that queen bee paper again, and I added a strip of washi. So this is a hexagon, kind of a rainbow hexagon washi from that One Canoe 2 collection, that set of washi from Saturday Afternoon. I added a strip of it just to give it a little bit more color, and I really like the way that that looks. It's a completely different pattern than my background paper, but it complements it really well, especially since it's just a little bit separated. They're not butted up right against each other. You'd probably be able to tell more that it's a very different pattern if they were closer together, but with that little bit of separation of white in between, it looks similar enough that it works. And it adds a little bit of color to both of those little chunks. So here's where I found another little line of rub-ons to add below my photo. So it's just a little line of triangles, and I'm going to add that to that blank space. And that's really all it needed. It just needed a little something there, and so that was perfect. I'll end up stamping my date there as well, but I think I do that off camera. So just to finish off the page, I'm going to add a few splatters. So I don't have a copper spray, but I've done this trick on a page recently and it worked out perfectly. So I grab just a copper Brilliance ink. This is a Versa Magic or Versa something. Copper ink, or Brilliance copper ink, and I just put a little bit on a little scrap of plastic and sprayed a tiny bit of water on it, and then I'm using a brush just to splatter some little copper splatters all over the place. I did cover up my photo to make sure that I didn't get any on my photo, and they ended up going a little wild, which is a risk you take when you add splatters, so they end up being a little bit more all over the place than I had hoped, but I still think it adds the right finishing touch to the page, and I'm happy with how it turns out. So here are some close-up photos. As always, everything I've used here will be linked in the description down below, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will be sure to get back to you. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks again, and I will see you all back here very soon.